Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome to a brand new video on my channel. And actually the start of a brand new series called How to Fix. This is basically a series where I take a franchise, be it movie, TV, game, that isn't quite living up to its expectations or it's just fallen from grace. What I'm going to be doing is giving you some of the reasons why I think it's failing and what I would do to fix it. And just bear in mind, I'm a fan of everything that I will talk about in this series, so I'm not just hating for hating's sake. I do want these things to succeed, otherwise what would be the point in wasting my time and talking about them. Today we're going to be starting off with actually my favourite TV show, Doctor Who. Wait, this doesn't feel right. Got it. Much better. Oh, I'm so lonely. Doctor Who is obviously one of the longest running TV programmes of all time. In fact, it might actually be. I'm gonna have to check that. I didn't check it, but we'll just say so anyway. And it's not hard to see why. The concept of a guy who travels around through time and space in a police box is just so mental that no wonder it took off and has lasted as long as it has, which is over 50 years now. Has the entire run of the show been perfect? No, absolutely not. But I feel as of late, it's really fallen from grace. Now obviously everything that I'm going to be saying in this video is how to improve the show, but none of it is sort of valid for series 10 as that is literally around the corner and it's more or less done, so no point in talking about that. So this is going to be aimed more towards the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who. We already know that Capaldi is leaving. Why, I wanted him to stay. But what exactly is wrong with Doctor Who? I'm going to take this off, this is too hot. The first problem is the concept of the show itself. It's amazing because you can literally do anything and go anywhere in space and time. You are completely unrestricted. The TARDIS can literally go anywhere. Sometimes that has worked out. Sometimes it's held the show back quite a bit because they are restricted obviously by the budget of the BBC. However, writing in Doctor Who typically is consistent. It's either consistently good or consistently bad, and I feel Capaldi's series as a whole, consistently bad. Don't get me wrong, I adore Capaldi. I think he is the best Doctor from the new series. However, the writing he's been given is just atrocious. I've got to say, there's literally a few episodes that I've genuinely enjoyed. All the rest range from okay to just complete shit. And then of course there's Hellbent, which, I mean, I don't want to talk about Hellbent. This video would be about 3 weeks long if I spoke about everything that's wrong with Hellbent, so we're just going to avoid it. But it seems to me that the show lately doesn't really know what it wants to do. It's so convoluted and bogged down with story arcs and threads that don't really go anywhere, but they're sort of teased to go somewhere, and then they'll go over here and over there, down here. It's just a mess. Plus, it seems like week in, week out, the stakes are just way too high. If you're starting a series with the Doctor dying, or a companion dying, or the TARDIS blowing up, where are you going to go for the finale? You can't really top that. But if you're doing that every single episode of every single series, it just gets so boring and repetitive. Just lower the stakes. Not every week has to include a planet being exploded, or the Doctor being murdered, or something ridiculously over the top like that. Sometimes less is more.
What are you doing?
I'm reversing the polarity of my ultrasonic screwdriver's power source.
Fan service can be a great thing, but sometimes it's just way too much. Doctor Who seems to be doing fan service now as plots of episodes as opposed to nice little nods every now and again. I'm just sick of all the references to Doctor Who's past. I just don't want to see it anymore. We already know who all the Doctors are. We don't need him to drag his wallet out and have all his previous faces. A story like The Magician's Apprentice, that literally just based itself off of a line of dialogue from Genesis of the Daleks, which is fine. Genesis of the Daleks is a great story. story, but it just did nothing with that actual story. It was just preying on your nostalgia for Genesis, so that then you'd be like, oh cool, it was about Genesis of the Daleks. But instead what they did was come up with a convoluted and pointless scene after pointless scene that just went nowhere, which was even more frustrating considering how they did actually have a decent story idea in there, the idea of little Bubby Davros. And that most interesting point there, that's the one thing that they neglected the most. The show is about moving forward and being constantly able to change itself. However, it just isn't doing that anymore because it's focusing so much on the past. Do you remember back in series 1 where there was obviously a new wave of fans coming into the show, myself being one of them? And in the episode Dalek, which was nostalgic enough for a lot of fans because this was the first time that we were seeing a Dalek again, but we didn't just get a Dalek, we got a glimpse of a Cyberman head in the museum, which was a nice little nod because for some viewers they would know exactly what a Cyberman was and they'd enjoy that, but it didn't actually interfere with the plot of that story. It was just a nice little nod during it. The show needs to do that again instead of focusing so much on just referencing constantly, whether it's a line of dialogue or like The Magician's Apprentice where it's an entire story based off of it. I get that the show wants to respect its past, but respect it by doing new and interesting things with older characters or monsters or villains or just something fresh and different, not just constantly dragging them back into the past to the good old days. Never mind the good old days. Create the new days, the good new days, as opposed to just shit. References I am fine with, but they just need to just calm them down. Doctor Who has created some of the most iconic aliens and monsters and villains in television and sci-fi history, but the thing is, they're just not treating them right in the slightest, which is a massive shame because when you look at villains like the Daleks and the Cybermen, they can easily be some of the scariest things on television. They once were. Now though, they're just a laughing stock. They just don't have anything for them to do. Now I understand that there is a rights deal that the BBC have with the Terry Nation estate when it comes to the Daleks, and if they want to use the Daleks, then they have to do a Dalek story every single year. I understand that, but there are ways around it. If you look at the year of specials, David Tennant's final year as the Doctor, there were no Dalek stories in that, but a Dalek does actually appear in the waters of Mars, thus sort of, I imagine, dealing with the rights okay. So just do that. Just have a Dalek cameo. You don't need to do a fully blown story with the Daleks when you clearly don't have anything that you can do with them. I genuinely cannot remember the last Dalek story that I actually thought was really good. I mean, Into the Dalek was okay, but other than that, I genuinely am struggling to think of a good Dalek story since probably David Tennant. And even then, some of them weren't great, but at least they were trying new things, like the whole Daleks in Manhattan hybrid thing. Sure, that didn't really work that well. Now it's just a simple case of, oh look, the Daleks, they're gonna kill us. The Cybermen as well. I mean, they are my favourite Doctor Who villain, but there hasn't been a really good Cyberman story in the new series since, again, the David Tennant era. Matt Smith didn't have any good Cyberman stories, and Capaldi, well, they had a really great concept with Darkwater, but they just fucked it up completely. The whole idea of the Cybermen converting the dead, that is amazing. It was so dark and so grim, but what did the Cybermen do in that story? Stand around, do nothing, really. They didn't kill anyone. They just were there, I guess. At least they look pretty. I understand if you want them in the show, but at least just give them a decent story. I mean, if you look at the 1980s, there were barely any Dalek and Cyberman stories, but the stories that they did have were fantastic. Arguably some of the best. I think in total, the Daleks appeared 3 times in like proper stories, because obviously they did appear in the 5 Doctors as well. But those 3 Dalek stories are easily some of the best in Doctor Who's history. Resurrection, Revelation, Remembrance, they are all great Dalek stories in arguably worse eras than now. The Cybermen as well. Earthshock is easily one of the best Doctor Who stories ever made. Silver Nemesis we don't need to talk about. But still, less is more. Like I said before, don't include them all the time. They don't need to be there. Come up with new creations. Come up with new ideas, new villains. It is probably difficult to write a Dalek story because everything you can do with a Dalek is pretty much done. You know, go to Skaro, meet them in space, they invade Earth. But you can think of new ways to tell those stories. Stop turning them into jokes as well. It's getting really ridiculous now. Like, it's not even the main villains, it's like Sontarans as well. Now, don't get me wrong, Sontarans are not the most important Doctor Who villain in its history, but the idea behind them is so good. They're a race of warmongers. There's a lot of really strong story ideas that you could do with that. But no, we have a stupid one called Strax, who I know is a defect, but it doesn't make sense why he's a butler for the lesbian lizard and the other one. I hate Strax. I hate him with a passion. I mean, if you love Strax, fine, but he is just nothing like a Sontaran to me. And if you're going to tell me, well, he's a defect, he's the only one in his batch, then look at the time of the Doctor, because in that story there are a couple of Sontarans that act a lot like Strax, and they are not Strax. They are clearly making them all into these weird potato-headed idiots. Just stop it and treat your villains and monsters properly and not like a joke. If you treat them like a joke, your audience is going to treat them like a joke. Doctor Who is famous for making children hide behind the sofa. Why don't we get back to that again instead of laughing at the weird pepper pot people or the potato men? That's just stupid. Just make them scary again. We need them to be scary again. I mean, I'm not easily scared. I am in my 20s, but still, I want to be creeped out a little bit. Bring back the fear factor in all of your villains and all of your monsters. If you want to do a parody episode like Love and Monsters, that's fine. Do that, but just know when to do that and when to take Doctor Who seriously. Doctor Who is always going to be a show where the actors in it will take everything seriously, so give them stuff that lets them do that and make the story seem threatening and like the Doctor is genuinely in peril. If he's just joking around, running from a thing that he's referencing, saying that, oh, he's got a plunger and an egg whisk, that is not scary in the slightest.
It's the end. But the moment has been prepared for.
At the time of recording this, the new Doctor hasn't been announced, so I don't know who it is going to be. So I could be completely wrong about this, I have no idea, but what I do know for sure is that the next Doctor is going to be very important. I mean, the new Doctor is always important, but I think now more than ever. Main reason being, your main audience isn't really on board with the show, and the casual viewer just sees it as a joke. So cast someone who genuinely has good acting chops and good range and will take it seriously and will make people want to come back and watch the show once again, so it can be the giant that it once was. However, now is not the time to take a gigantic risk. So just play it safe, guarantee that your audiences will come back with an actor that people will genuinely want to see and who is genuinely likable just to see what he's gonna do. We need multi-part stories again. I have been saying this for years. When you think of Doctor Who, there's a few main traits about it that everyone seems to be familiar with. Music, TARDIS, titles, Daleks, and cliffhangers. They are integral to Doctor Who. They are some of the best and most important moments in the show's entire history. Some of the most iconic moments in Doctor Who have come from a cliffhanger, like the Invasion of Time Part 4, Army of Ghosts, Caves of Androzani Part 3. These are moments that stick with people forever, and they are on the edge of their seats because they can't wait to see what is going to happen next week. If you just cram one story into 45 minutes, it just doesn't feel like it can develop fully. A number of people on YouTube have said this before, but Doctor Who needs to be at least an hour long if they are not going to go with cliffhangers, because in 45 minutes, with the amount of stuff that Doctor Who is trying to do, you just can't fit it all in. Don't worry about the casual viewer. It really doesn't matter whether or not they tune in. One reason that Stephen Moffat said is because casual viewers would tune in week 2 and not have an idea what the hell was going on because they missed part 1. Funnily enough, the show isn't made for casual viewers, the show is made for the fans who will actually sit down and will actually watch it week after week after week. And if the casual viewer enjoys part 2, I'm pretty sure they will go back and watch part 1 on iPlayer. Don't worry about the casual viewer, just do it for the fans who will actually watch and give you your main viewing figures. People aren't tuning in because we're getting underdeveloped stories that just are over like that. If you flesh out the stories like they used to do, even back in the first few series of Doctor Who, there were at least a lot of stories in there that had a cliffhanger and lasted more than just 1 week. It just needs to happen again. Like, that's what Doctor Who was based off of. The entire classic series, I don't think there's a single one-part story. Oh, the 5 Doctors. Yeah, that's one. But the majority of stories were actually multi-part stories that some would even go on for 14 weeks. Okay, that was Trial of a Time Lord and it wasn't that good. The point still stands. Typically, a story in the classic era would be 4 parts. And I know that modern television has changed dramatically since the 60s, 70s and 80s, but I'm pretty sure a lot of Doctor Who fans out there do want cliffhangers and do want multi-part stories week in and week out. Plus, cliffhangers are just awesome, if done right. Overall then, that's a few things that I would do to fix Doctor Who. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you think Doctor Who needs fixing? Do you agree with the points that I made? Do you think Doctor Who is perfect as it is and that it doesn't need any improving whatsoever? In which case you are very, very delusional. But I will respect your opinion nonetheless. But anyway, if you did enjoy this video, guys, make sure you leave a like. I'd be very appreciative if you did do that. And in the comments below, if I missed anything out, let me know so I can see what you guys would do. And also, if you want to see more of this How to Fix series and more videos based around Doctor Who, make sure you click the subscribe button and I will love you forever. Probably. We will probably never meet, but it'll be good. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.